Okay, so we'll start. Just a few deep breaths in and out. Just allowing our body and mind to be completely present with the intention of receiving these hard instructions coming down all the way from the Buddha himself on how to open our heart in the most extreme way to limitlessness. And inviting to the space above us, hovering over our head, Guru Chenrezig, inseparable from His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, a being of radiant white light with 1,000 arms and 1,000 eyes. And all of our teachers of this life, those that we recognize and those that are guiding us, whom we have not yet identified, and all the lamas of the lineage, Shantideva, Lama Atisha, all the Kadampa Geshes, Lama Tsongkhapa, all coming down in the ear to mouth instruction coming to us today. And visualizing ourselves surrounded by all the various beings who help us in our lives, our mother and our father, all those who have given us and support our body, our dwelling, our food, everything we rely on for survival and enjoyment, and every living being that supports them. Allowing the living beings to expand into infinity around us. And on their behalf, we're taking these teachings and entrusting ourselves in refuge to Guru Chenrezig, all of our teachers, as we recite the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum. Visualizing that white nectars and light pour down from Guru Chenrezig's heart, enter the crown of our head and descend to our own heart, blessing our minds to receive these teachings exactly in the manner which we need to put them into practice for the benefit of all. Om Mani Padme Hum. 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 Om Mani Padme. And then we'll recite the refuge verse once, and then the prostration verse to our future bodhisattva selves and all those bodhisattvas who guide us all the time. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. The next verse. I bow down to the bodies of them in whom the sacred precious mind is born. I seek refuge in that source of joy who brings to happiness even those who harm them. So here we are, fourth class. There's a lot to cover. I like to do a little recap where we are now. So just reminder, this class is inside out, tapping our potential. And as Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, the purpose of our life is to free every single living being from every kind of suffering and place them in a happiness from which they will never fall. The happiness of freedom from suffering and the bliss of enlightenment. That's the purpose of life. When we're in a kind of a funk sometimes and we're wondering what's the point of it all, that's our purpose. And that's what we're working towards. And we don't really have a choice. It's either suffer or find some suspended animation for a while, or become a superhero for the benefit of the whole planet and the whole world. So we might as well get on with it, because that's pretty much what we need to do. And why wouldn't we want to? Yeah, so that's our potential, that's our purpose. And this class is developing bodhicitta. It's how do we actually form the kind of mind that really wants to attain that end? How do we get to a point where we personally are taking responsibility for every single suffering and problem that we see, read about, hear about? It comes into our awareness in any way. How do we get to the point where we think, oh, that's my job. That's my job. To solve that problem is my job. Every time we think of how insane things are in the world right now, that's our job, is to fix that, is to somehow fix that, figure it out. And so how do we get to the point where we have that kind of bravery to even want to take that on? And then what does it actually mean to even try to fix all the problems that we see, to stop all the suffering and somehow place every living being in a state of happiness from which they will never fall? How do we do that? So we've looked at a couple things. We've looked at, there's these two methods for developing the special brave attitude, that courage. And the first one we went through is this 7-point cause and effect. And we look at our relationships, on the basis of equanimity. We looked at our relationships and how friend, enemy, stranger are changing all the time. And our relationships are changing all the time. And the boxes that we put people in and the labels that we put on people, they don't really work. They're not fixed. They're flexible. And so there's no real point in being stuck in someone being our favorite, or stuck in having someone we want to push away, and recognizing that a stranger is not going to stay a stranger, and that all of that is flexible. And so there's no point in staying stuck in a permanent fixed relationship with people as this or as that, and us here and them there. And then actually, if we look at our mind, the flow of our mind going back before this life, and if there was one life, there must have been more than one life. And if there was more than one life, then how do you ever find a beginning? Because the very reasoning that there must be one life more than this, then there's no beginning. That's what the Buddha teaches. There's no beginning to our consciousness, or the number of lives, or the number of relationships, and the number of forms that we've taken. And we've been doing this play since beginningless time with all the different living beings. We've all been in this dance, all trying to find happiness and trying to get free from suffering and captured by an incorrect way of understanding who we are and what our world is and how do we be happy and how do we avoid suffering. And we've just been doing this. And in all those different relationships, the most powerful one that every living being has been for us is our mother, where they actually, our mother who gave us her own body, you know, her own body as a hotel with full service, everything, you know, gave us food and gave us protection and gave us everything we needed. And then, you know, went through for 9 months, gave us her body, and then went through the pain of childbirth, and then protected us from dying. I mean, when we were babies, we were completely vulnerable. We're just lying there. We can't do anything. We can't even roll over. We can't do anything. And if you think of how vulnerable that is, and that our mothers kept us alive, you know, fed us, protected us, clothed us, cleaned us. And if for some reason our mother, or we know people whose mother couldn't do that, at least she found a way for us to be protected and you know, cultivated as a living human being. And so, you know, all that kindness that a mother gives us, and that all beings give us all the time, you know, that we think of ourselves as an independent, separate self, but our own bodies came from a mother and a father, and everything that we depend on and rely on and use, food, clothing, shelter, everything that's around us right now comes from other living beings. I mean, the only thing we bring to the story is our mind. That's the only thing. Everything else physically came from others' contribution, you know, willingly or unwillingly. You know, are the houses that we live in were the homes of insects and birds and spirit beings, and you know, whether they wanted to give it or not, their life force energy was sacrificed so that we have shelter. And you know, the same goes with food and clothing. So when we really think about it, this idea that we're kind of looking for happiness only for ourselves just doesn't really make sense. I mean, how could we just think of ourselves when our whole life is really a contribution of countless, the energy, the life force energy of countless other living beings? And so recognizing that, you know, we want to use our life in a way that repays that kindness, kind of pays it forward, that we're in this unbelievable position where we're supported and we have met with these spiritual teachings that can actually free us from suffering forever. And why wouldn't we want to pass that on? Why wouldn't we want to give that to others? Why wouldn't we want others to have happiness? And then when we look at what it takes for someone to be happy, or we look at how to solve the problems of this world, it gets a little bit complicated. I mean, if we looked at just in an ordinary way how to try to solve the problems of this world, you know, if we get rid of poverty and we get rid of hunger and we get rid of weapons and violence and political corruption, and everyone starts to take care of the planet well, and you know, so everybody is healthy and relating to each other. There's still aging, and there's still sickness, and there's still death. And even if you could get rid of sickness, there's still aging, and there's still death. And those are sufferings. I mean, the way we currently experience them, those are sufferings. You know, losing our life and having to separate from the things and the people that we love, and having to separate from our body and our identification with everything. I mean, it's not enough. Like, even if we tried to solve all the problems on the planet, there's still this existential issue of aging, sickness, and death. And you know, the Buddha
talks about birth as well. And most of us, we don't remember our birth, so it's a little bit hard for us to relate to that. But it's one of the top 4 sufferings. And sometimes I think, we don't remember it because it was so horrible. It was so traumatic that we don't remember our birth because of that. And, it's said that one of the reasons that we don't recognize necessarily, we don't remember our past lives, or we don't recognize people from our past lives, is we've gone through this incredible trauma of death and birth. And those 2 things have kind of blocked out our ability, because we'd have to pass through them to recognize our previous lives and our previous relationships, that we're not really capable of doing that. It's just too hard to pass through those boundaries. But there are meditations that we can do where we tap into the beginninglessness of our mind, and we walk ourselves back in this life, days and then months and then years, and we actually try to get back to what it might have been like to take birth and then be in the womb and then go before that. And if you develop a deep enough concentration, it's said that you can actually remember, you can remember past lives. It's not considered a huge city to be able to do that. It just takes single pointed concentration so that you can stay with that concentration long enough to follow the continuity, and then you could remember past lives. So that's one method, is our connection and developing affection and a sense of responsibility and wanting to pay it back, pay it forward. And so wanting people to have a happiness and wanting them to be free from suffering, and then realizing that we have to change the game. We can't just move players around the chessboard. If we really want to solve the problem of suffering and place people in a happiness from which they will never fall, we have to get to the root of the problem, which is, we're going to talk about this a little bit more in this class, which is this ignorance. It's a misapprehension. It's not just a passive not knowing. It's an active misknowing of who we are and who we are in relation to everything around us. And because of that, we've set up this whole wheel of life, this whole dukkha, which actually means a wheel that's off balance, off its axis, like the grocery cart with a bad wheel. We're living in a life that's just off because our perception is off. Our understanding of who we are is incongruent, is disharmonious with how things exist. We think we're independent, permanent, separate beings, and we relate to everything like that, and it's just wrong. And so because of that, there's all these imprints and residues that are put on our mind stream, and we have all this suffering because we're kind of a victim of our own universe all the time. We feel like we're being hit by things that we had nothing to do with, when actually, ultimately, we created all of it from our actions in the past. That's the karma of it, which is said to be the most profound understanding there is, even more than the truth of emptiness. It's said that only a Buddha can see the karma of things. Only a Buddha can understand exactly why my hair is blonde and my eyes are blue, and why I have a scar here, and why every single detail of everything that we see, hear, smell, taste, sense in our bodies, even the kinds of thoughts that we have, the kinds of environments that we live in, whether we get sick, whether medicine works, whether people around us are reliable, all of those things, all are karmic results. They're all results from actions that we've done in the past and put imprints in our mind. How it's actually acting like a movie projector, project our experience of life. But this class isn't about that. So we're not going to go into that in depth, but that all informs what we're trying to do here, because we're trying to change the programming. We're trying to change the wiring, not only of ourselves, but of every single living being. And so to do that, we need Buddhahood. We have to attain enlightenment. And why? What does that even mean? In Buddhism, it's a very specific state of mind. Enlightenment, compassion, those words are thrown out kind of loosely these days. But in Buddhism, it's a very precise term that has very specific implications. And the Sanskrit word is Buddha, which means woken up, awoke. And when it was translated to Tibetan, it was translated, there's different ways to translate. One's called the literal translation, which is like the three jewels. We've often heard of the three jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha of refuge. And then there's what's called the meaning translation. So a meaning translation in Tibetan, the three jewels ends up in Tibetan, the words are the three rare and sublime ones. So it was the way it translated in Tibetan from Sanskrit is, what does that mean? What does that actually mean? What's not more than just the literal words? What is the meaning behind it? So Tibetan did that with the word Buddha as well. So in Tibetan, that Sanskrit term Buddha, awakened one, was translated as Sangye. This two-syllable word, Sangye. And Sang means clean, completely purified, completely clean. And it refers to the mind being completely cleaned of all affliction and all mental veils and what are called these two main obscurations. One is the obscurations to liberation, which is self-grasping, the self-grasping mind that keeps us stuck in this wheel. And the other is the obscurations to omniscience. And so a Buddha is said to be omniscient, in that a Buddha knows everything all the time. There's just no more veil over the mind. So the potential of the mind, just from Sang, just from cleaning it off, is omniscience. And what, it was described to me once, we think of omniscience as they know every fact. They know how many beans are in the jar and how many, specks of dust are on the earth. And that can be true. The main thing a Buddha knows, though, is exactly what any living being at any living time needs to take up and give up in that moment that will lead them to their own liberation and enlightenment as quickly as possible. That's the main thing that a Buddha knows. They know your mind and they know your karma, and they can see that if you say this word and if you do this action and if you refrain from this action and if you, in all those little decisions that we're making all the time in our actions and our thoughts, body, speech, and mind, by just making these little adjustments, that's how we can be led to enlightenment. Because it's said that, Buddhas can't wash away our sufferings like water, and they can't remove our sufferings like taking out a thorn, and they can't transfer their realizations into our minds. All they can do is teach. That's the main thing a Buddha can do. So they're omniscient, but they're not omnipotent. They can't fix everything by themselves without our participation. So in that respect, every time we make a prayer or a request or a begging for a blessing, that creates an opening for enlightened activity to be part of our life and part of our mind. It's like a Buddha can't enter if we've got a shield around us that's not interested, that's not receptive. And so it said, like, the hook of the Guru's blessings, or the hook of the Buddha's blessings, it really relies in us, in our own openness, our own receptivity, our own begging for those blessings. They're all there waiting to help us all the time. We just have to be receptive. And so that's the song is all the limitation is completely cleared away from the mind. And the mind is, in its nature, is vast and it's limitless and it has no boundary. And so song in this cleaning part of a Buddha is all the limitation, all the mental veil is gone. And it's just pure, open, limitless energy. And the second syllable, gye, means to develop or to activate or to awaken. And so there's these two components. There's this purification, cleansing component, and then there's this development, activation component. And, you know, it's also said that to some degree, the more important part is the cleaning away, because a lot of the qualities of love and compassion and, you know, knowing of reality and all of those things, they're like intrinsic to the mind, because they're in harmony with how things are. So once you clear away ignorance and once you clear away obscuration, a lot of qualities just naturally start to pop up. Yay, they start to, like a flower blossoming, they just start to come up. It's not like you have to plod along and every single quality, you know, every single positive quality you can think of, you have to develop it one by one by one by one by one. I mean, you have to work on that. That's what things like the 6 perfections are. But primarily, it's this getting everything else out of the way and then developing this mind of bodhicitta, this wish, just merely the wish to benefit all other beings creates the cause that when you clear everything off away, all the mental veils away, all that enlightened activity is activated. It's just activated because of that wish that we have cultivated to you for all of our energy. Once it's completely not fettered anymore, all of our energy just to be able to benefit, that's what happens when all the limits are cleared because of our bodhicitta. All the energy becomes fully available to help others. And so that's Sangye, that's Buddhahood. That's all we're trying to do. That's all we're trying to be, is a Buddha. So there's a lot of cleansing and purification, and then this bodhicitta, this developing bodhicitta, which is the essence of this class, you know, trying to open our heart and develop love and develop compassion and have the wish to be whatever is needed, both in inanimate form and as living beings. The more we expand and develop that, that's what creates the Buddha's activity of being in the world. You know, it said a Buddha, you know, it says that the Buddhas are around us all the time. They're not just living beings. They can manifest as a bridge or a boat or a ship or a, you know, you need something and suddenly it appears, or, you know, so animate and inanimate objects, both. You know, Buddha's not limited by having to be in a body or having to be, look as if there's mind there. A Buddha can be a tree. A Buddha can manifest as an animal. Anything that helps awaken our mind, that could be Buddha activity. And it said, you know, even other kinds of spiritual traditions, that's considered a Buddha activity. I mean, anything that helps develop love in the world or compassion in the world or the mind of non-harming, that's considered Buddha activity, which is, you know, also one of the reasons that, you know, one of the bodhisattva vows is you never put down other religious or spiritual traditions if they're benefiting living beings, because living beings need different methods. They need different kinds of teaching. So who are we to say that as long as it's creating love and compassion and benefiting others, that's great, fantastic. That's Buddha activity as far as we're concerned. So, so yeah, Sangye, that's our potential. That is our destiny. And the more that we develop this mind of bodhicitta, this sense of connection and love, and this special brave attitude, this sense of responsibility of becoming whatever is needed to benefit others, the more imprint our mind with that, then the more ripe we are that as the cleansing happens, that starts to manifest more and more. So that one method of exchanging self for others, I talked to Geshe Sherab about this over the weekend, because I was asking him, why is this other method, exchanging self for others, which we're working on today and last week, why was that secret? I was trying to appreciate why that was secret. And I was asking him about it. And he said, His Holiness the Dalai Lama has said that for some people, especially back in Lama Atisha's time, the idea of taking on the suffering of others was too it was too fearful. They didn't like the idea of trying to take on the suffering of others. It was too misunderstood. And then he also said that these two methods, apparently there's two dispositions of beings. There's those who develop bodhicitta, the mind of love, compassion, responsibility, and the determination to attain enlightenment for the benefit of others. There's people who develop that first, and they do it with a little bit of belief in true existence. It's a little bit concrete. And then there's another kind of disposition, kind of being who really needs to understand emptiness first. And then on the basis of wisdom, they develop bodhicitta. And that they're a little bit more intellectually inclined, a little bit more. They say intelligence, but I don't like that discrimination. I'd say it's just heartfelt versus intellect. Like how you approach it, and that for the people who develop the mind of bodhicitta by way of equalizing, exchanging self for others, they really need to be convinced that the goal is reachable first, that they really need to understand, they want to understand why realizing emptiness stops suffering. Like, how is enlightenment possible? And it is possible. And so then I can develop this mind of exchanging self for others. So they're kind of different approaches. And as I mentioned earlier, at the end, they could get blended. So you don't have to be all one or all the other. But that there was a little bit of this misunderstanding of how to do this practice of exchanging self for others, and specifically Tonglen, which we're going to work on tonight, with a correct understanding. And so to me, that made some sense, because I really like this practice of Tonglen, this exchanging self for others. And there was a period in my life where I had been ordained for a very short period of time, like 1.5 years, and I had made quite a lot of mistakes in my ordination. And I was very, I don't know if depressed is the right word, but I was distraught. I was very distraught because, when I became a nun, it was like honoring the thing that was the most treasured thing in my life. And then I discovered that I couldn't be a nun. That wasn't my personality type. And I kind of blew up the whole thing. I just rebelled. But spiritually, it was very, very painful. And I was doing a retreat, and I was trying to do this practice of Tonglen, where you take on the sufferings of others and you give away, your happiness to others. And I was taking it very personally. And I realized that I was taking on the sufferings of others in my mind, in meditation. And I had a very concrete way of relating to it. And it started to become very, very painful and upsetting. And in a way, and I had to stop the practice. And I realized it was because I wasn't coming at it from the right wisdom place. I was a very solid, self-existent me who had done a lot of mistakes and had quite a bit of low self-esteem, but that's not really quite the right word. But anyway, I was very upset with myself. And then I was piling on suffering, taking on the suffering of others on top of that. And it was almost like, I mentioned this last week, it was like this Jesuit self-flagellation practice or something. It was like, just go, just give me more, just give me more, just give me more. But it wasn't coming from a place of wisdom. And and I had to stop at that point. I had to kind of reevaluate. And so my relationship with this practice has changed quite a bit. And one of the things that Geshe Sherab and I talked about was there's a lot of different traditions in the practice of Tonglen. And the thing that you have to really get to the essence of is that we're trying to overcome the mind of self-cherishing, self-grasping, and we're trying to open the heart of love. That's the essence of the practice. And so if by doing it, your sense of I is getting stronger, even if it's in a negative way, a painful negative way, the practice has gone a little bit awry. And so you have to make an adjustment. And so the way I've kind of come to understand it in my mind is we kind of have to bifurcate a little bit about who we are as a sentient being who deserves happiness, because we do deserve happiness, and what's the enemy? Where's that? What is the enemy? When we put the blame on one thing alone, what does that really mean? Because it's very easy for us to get it confused with me as a sentient being. And it starts to feel like, hey, wait, I want to be happy. What's this? Put the blame on one thing alone. I mean, I want to be happy. Like, well, it's all my fault. Like, it's delicate. Because we're so merged with ignorant self obsession that we can't really separate ourselves as a sentient being out from our ignorant grasping to ourselves. And the put the blame on one thing alone is to the ignorant grasping to ourselves, because that's what's causing all the problems. And the sentient being, the us that's just a sentient being, that's a completely fluid being, body and mind is changing all the time, who just wants to experience happiness and doesn't want to experience suffering, that being deserves to be happy. And so we have to really understand the difference between them. So we're going to try to get that a little bit. So put the blame on one thing alone. You know, it's said that when you have affliction, the word in Sanskrit for affliction is a klesha. And a klesha is based on ignorance, this misperception of who we are. And it turns out that the root klish from klesha is the same root that's used for mosquitoes. In language in Sanskrit, that's so it said the definition of a klesha would be like having a mosquito, around your ear. The definition is upon its production, it disturbs your peace of mind. That's the definition of a klesha. So whenever we are not in peace of mind, there's an affliction. There's ignorance grasping a true existence operating and dominating our consciousness. And that is the definition, that we're not in a balanced place, and that the enemy is at work behind the scenes. And this great analogy that Shantideva gives again is, and he gives it when he's talking about being harmed by others, but I think it's helpful with ourselves as well. And he says, when someone hits you with a stick, you don't get mad at the stick. You get mad at the person. It's not the stick's fault that they hit you. So you get mad at the person, but the person is also being wielded by afflictions. So why are you getting mad at the person? It has nothing to do with the person. It's their afflictions that are driving them to do that action. So, make sure you blame the right thing. Not the stick, not the person, but the afflictions. That's what's to blame. That's the same as putting the blame on one thing alone. So, we are a person who wants to be happy, who deserves happiness, who really doesn't understand how to get it and how to keep it and how to avoid suffering. And we're being puppeted all the time by ignorance, grasping at true existence, and all of the afflictions that set us up in this relationship of separation. And because we're in a relationship of separation, there's, wanting to get things and wanting to push things away and not really understanding who we are. And so we're always in this existential discomfort because we feel separated and isolated and limited and bounded, the iron net of self-grasping. And we've always had that. So it didn't start, it's not like there's an evolution, like somehow we were free once and then that came along. We've been this way since beginningless time. We've never been free of this affliction of a misunderstanding of how we exist. So it said, once you get rid of that, it doesn't come back. Once you've penetrated the truth of reality, the truth of who we are in a very deep state of meditation, it's kind of like my Adam dream. Once you see the truth for what it is, you can't be fooled anymore. You can't go back and experience it a different way. You're free. It's gone, completely gone. So what is it? I mean, how do we recognize it? As Lama Zopa Rinpoche likes to say, I'm sitting. Right now, I'm sitting. And the only reason we say I'm sitting is that the body is sitting and the mind is here with the body. So we say, I'm sitting. There's no other reason than that. And that's the I that does exist. It depends on the body and the mind. It's a dependent relationship. And we, it gets very technical. It can get very technical, but what I am is basically a label, a concept that sort of summarizes the body and mind. The body and mind are kind of the essence of what I am. But we call this Kendall, this combination of ever flowing, ever changing, ever moving things. We call this Kendall, or your John, or Bobby, or anybody, Mary. And it's nothing more than that. But that's not actually how we relate. I mean, we really relate to my body, my mind, and it's almost like there's this possessor. There's somebody who possesses the body and the mind, and we're kind of carrying them along, and the real me, the real Kendall, the real I is something different. This analysis is it the same as or different from? So, the way we relate to it is that I am different. Somehow I am different from the body and the mind. Otherwise, we wouldn't say my body and my mind, but in any particular given moment, if someone hurts this body, it's just as if they've hurt me. And so the mind kind of shifts a little bit. Somehow that identification suddenly became the same. I'm the same because someone just hurt this body. I'm not different, because if I was really different, who cares what happens to the body? It has nothing to do with me. But in that moment, the mind kind of shifts and it's like, oh, that's me, that they just hurt me. And it's very slippery. This identification with belief is very, very slippery, but it's not in keeping with what's true. And so the way you catch it usually is if something happens in an exaggerated way, like they say, usually if someone blames you for doing something you didn't do, or calls you a name, or usually something that would bring up anger. That's how you get this sense of your strong sense of I. It's for us, it's actually there kind of all the time. It said when you're doing this meditation, you try to bring up an exaggerated experience so that you can really identify it, to do the analysis. And then when you don't find it, there's this gap, there's this absence of being able to find that I that seemed to exist, that seems to possess everything, that kind of, it's a bubble that sort of floats around us and is kind of ready to pounce at any moment with inflation, with defense, with protection, with attack. But that's not how we exist. And that actually, if we understood that we existed as not inherent, not solid, if we understood that we exist as kind of a mere name on a flow of life force energy, and we weren't trying to freeze things, we wouldn't be in suffering. And we would understand that how we arise is we're a dependent arising, in dependence on the body and the mind. And so how we build up the imprints on the mind is how we're going to experience ourselves in the future. So, that's why things like generosity or love, or, they're going to change our experience of the mind, our experience of who we are. And the more that we can penetrate wisdom so that we don't freeze ourselves as an I that's permanent, that is a possessor, the more freedom we will have. And I think with these teachings on emptiness, you have to kind of, you always have to get back to, why does that matter? So, the idea is that we think we exist in a particular way as a solid, permanent being. And permanent means unchanging. And even though we know our body and mind are changing all the time, our sense of ourselves doesn't really change. Our sense of ourselves kind of floats along in kind of a permanent way the whole time. There's me, Kendall, who was a child, and I went through college, and I went through all these experiences, and now I'm sitting here teaching. And so the body and mind are changing all the time, but my sense of me, my sense of Kendall, my sense of I, that's not really changing. It's kind of permanently sort of floating along the whole time, as if I exist separately, possessing these things and wanting to protect them and defend them. But as I've said, our sense of identity can switch and move and change like a shapeshifter very quickly. Suddenly we're the same as the mind, and suddenly we're the same as the body if someone hurts the body. But if we were separate from if we were the body, then if someone says words to us that are unkind, why would that matter? That doesn't hurt the body at all. But somehow we have this persona, this I, this self that exists in a particular way. And when someone presents us with evidence contrary to that, we react. Or in relation, or in opposition to that, we react. So whenever there's that cliché mind, that mosquito mind, that reactive mind, you will for sure always find that there's a strong sense of I there. And that is the object, what's called the object of negation. That is the object that is untrue, that we believe is true, and we do everything in relationship to that. And because of that, we stay stuck and we stay suffering, because that doesn't exist. It's not true. And because it's not true, we can never satisfy it. It will never feel secure because it's not true. But we act as if it is, and we believe that it is. And so we get caught in all of these stories and all of these ways of reacting, and tribes. And, like I said last time, our sense of I can even expand to objects, my house, my people, my family. It can expand my country. It can expand. The identification with belief can expand beyond. And once we start to catch it a little bit, then you'll see that it feels very real at the time. It feels very real, especially when we're angry. There's a very strong sense of this I that rises up, that has to take action because something's been done that's outrageous. And that's actually a really good time. It's a very hard time, as His Holiness says. It's actually better to train before that happens. But if you're kind of curious to see what that exaggerated sense of self is, the best time is when you're angry. And it always comes from the heart. It's just this very strong, solid thing. So when we do Tonglen, That's what we're taking the suffering onto, is that ignorant, self-centered, permanent, incorrect perception that we identify with as me, which is not really me. And what we're trying to do is find freedom from that. If we were free from that, I mean, can you imagine if there was no more self-concern? If there was just being for the purpose of the happiness of all, like if that there was no concern about what happens to my body or my things or there was no sense of possession of my or I, or that was just gone. If that was just gone, I mean, what a relief that would be to not have that little bubble floating there all the time, just positioning and assessing and calculating. It was just gone. All there is just being for others, just being a source of happiness, just a happiness machine for everyone. I mean, how fantastic. So when we do Tonglen, we're taking the suffering onto that ignorance, and we're not just thinking of it as ourselves, but the more we understand that that's the source of our own pain, the more that we can relate to the pain of others. And this is also really important. You know, it sort of gets back to the whole Lam Rim. You know, the reason we meditate on all these other points of the Lam Rim is the more we understand our own suffering and how we cause our own suffering, the more compassion we have, not only for ourselves, you know, and the mistakes that we make out of our confusion. So we find a way to forgive ourselves of the mistakes that we've made, and the determination to not get hooked again. You know, that happens a lot, but we could, you know, you have to keep trying. But we also understand when we're looking at the actions of others, that everybody's driven, everybody's a puppet of this same ignorant, tight iron net of self-grasping. And so we can start to realize that somebody who we may have a very negative view of, we can separate the person, the sentient being, from their behavior, which is driven by affliction, which is driven by ignorance. We have a common, even people who we completely disagree, our worldview completely disagree, we have a shared enemy, which is the ignorance that's grasping at self-existence. We all have that disease in common. We all have that illness in common. And that's the problems of our whole world. Every single problem there is comes from that. That's what creates pride. That's what creates greed. That's what creates anger. That's what creates violence. That's what makes people rape people and steal from people and kill people and lie. And all of that comes because of this ignorance, grasping at self-existence, feeling that it needs to complete itself somehow, and it never is going to be complete because it's not in harmony with how things are. And the stronger the ignorance, the worse the affliction. So the people who have the craziest minds are most captured by this same ignorance that captures us. We have the same shared enemy, and the people who are the most destructive have it the worst. And so they are the most out of sync with truth and with reality and with connection and with love. And so the more we understand it in ourselves and the more compassion we have with ourselves, the more compassion we can have for others, because we understand the mechanics of what's driving people. And it's not personal, it's ignorance. Which is a kind of its own machine. And there's this great quote by Nagarjuna, which I like, and it's, self is a devilish mind. You are under the control of a wrong view. These 5 aggregates are empty. There is no sentient being there. how great would it be just to live like that? Just to be the flow, to be a flow of everything wonderful. So with Tonglen, I don't want to talk that much longer because I want to actually have time to do this meditation. With Tonglen, the idea with Tonglen is it's part of it's the real nuts and bolts of this exchanging self for others. So on the basis of equanimity, we recognize that we're all equal in that we all want happiness and we all don't want to suffer. And we also recognize that this boundary of self and others is also a little bit arbitrary. We've come to familiarize our sense of self, as Shantideva says, with the sperm and blood of others over time. That's now become our body, and so now we think of this as self, this body as self. But actually, its components is actually made of the material of others. But our habituation, we think of this as self. So this idea is that of something being inherently other and our self is here. Even that's a little bit arbitrary. It's just familiarity. It's just how we've trained our mind over time in this life and in many, many lives that self is here and other is there. But it's not really like that. Again, there can be, our sense of boundary can include family, can include friends, can include tribe or nationality or any of it. So that's also flexible. We're equal in that we want and deserve happiness. We don't want and we don't deserve to suffer, none of us, and we just don't know what we're doing. We don't know how. And then there's, the disadvantages of self-cherishing, which was our homework for last week. Just all the ways that self-cherishing karmically, and that it causes us to harm others, which causes us to have negative and harmful experiences, but also all this trapped in the iron net of self-grasping that I've just been describing. And there's nothing that comes of being concerned with ourselves all the time. It doesn't work. If it did, we'd be happy. We wouldn't have a problem. But that's not how it is. It hasn't worked so far. So let's try something else. And so then there's the advantages of cherishing others, which is, we get out of our own limitation. We get out of our own prison. Every single positive thing karmically in life comes from cherishing others. When we practice generosity, we get resources. When we practice non-harming of others, then others are kind and protecting of us. And every kind of action that creates happiness and happy experiences in our own lives is in dependence on cherishing others. And all of our life depends on others. So they're worth being cherished. And as Lama Zopa Rinpoche likes to say, there would be no Buddhas if there weren't sentient beings. Like the fact that we even have spiritual teachings, that we even find ourselves in this place where we are receiving teachings and we're learning how to free our mind and we're learning how to tap into this limitless love that's part of our nature. And all of that is because there are teachers who are teaching and there are enlightened beings who woke up, and all of that is dependent on great compassion for sentient beings, and all of that's dependent on sentient beings. So even the fact that we have a spiritual life and that we have, even some glimpse of what our purpose and our potential is and how to actually reach it and how to, have the happiness of freedom and the bliss of enlightenment, even that is because of others, is because of their mere existence, nothing else. Just the fact that all these living beings exist is why there's all these holy beings in our lives and why there's all this teaching. And so, then there's this wish to exchange. I want to stop thinking only of myself and I want to think of all beings. And at this point, I don't really like to make it self and others anymore. I kind of feel this is where my personal bifurcation, I think, makes sense, because everybody deserves happiness, including the sentient being that is me. And so when we exchange ourselves for others, I really like to think of it as, we're exchanging self-cherishing for the happiness and well-being of all. That's what we're exchanging. And we're exchanging self-cherishing and self-centered attitude of all beings for the happiness and love and well-being of all. That's the alchemy. That's the transformation that we are determined to achieve, starting with ourselves. And so with Tonglen, it says, you start taking with yourself. You start taking your own future suffering and taking it upon your self-cherishing now. And then as you do this practice, between sessions, the homework that we have for this week is you think of yourselves, you are a representative of all living beings. That's how we live our life. And so whenever there is an experience of suffering, this only some Rinpoche has a little, this is in your homework, so you have to write it down. But whenever there is an experience of suffering, you think, may I take the sufferings of sentient beings upon myself. May the ocean of suffering dry up. And as Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, if you're suffering anyway, why not do it for everybody? I mean, why not just take everybody's suffering on while you're suffering and hope that by your suffering, that suffering's finished. So whenever you're having, if you're feeling depressed or you don't have enough money or something didn't work out or you have a physical ailment or an emotional, whatever unpleasant experience you're having, experience it on behalf of everybody. I got it anyway. I got this. As long as I'm going to have to go through this anyway, I got it. I'll take it. And may the ocean of suffering dry up. And then whenever you're experiencing happiness, think, I dedicate all my virtues to all sentient beings. May benefit and happiness pervade all of space. Because the only reason we experience happiness is from virtue, and virtue is dependent on either holy beings or sentient beings. That's the only way we can generate virtue in the mind. And so, why not, in the minute that we have a happy experience, just wish it upon everybody, send it out to everybody, so that our whole life becomes alchemy. Our whole life becomes on behalf of others. If we're experiencing suffering, we're taking it on behalf of others. And if we're experiencing happiness, we're wishing it upon others. And so more and more, this sense of a solitary, independent, separated iron net me, it's just gone. We're just living for others. That is the purpose of our life. And as we become more and more attuned to that, then things we don't take it all so personally. It's not personal, it's energetic. And I find it kind of interesting. My older sister, she's not Buddhist. She's very into this spiritual path that's based on quantum physics. And their whole, the conclusion they've come to, at least I don't understand it super well. I haven't studied it, but from her experience, the conclusion that they've come to in quantum physics, as far as a spiritual way of being goes, is that the only thing is love. That's the only thing that makes any sense, is to try to tune in to the energy of loving beings and caring about beings and living for others. That's what quantum physics is coming to, in the same way that Buddhism has. So that's the alchemy of Tonglen. And as Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, there is no way we can totally purify Sang, that cleansing. There's no way to totally purify all the gross and subtle obscurations and develop, Gye, the qualities to obtain enlightenment without this vital practice. So we're going to do that practice right now. Tonglen. I'm just going to describe it super quick. Now I think we're just going to do it. We're just going to do it. In short, I'm just going to. So when we do this meditation of taking on the suffering of others and giving others happiness, again, I've blended a couple traditions. So the Gelug tradition is, you identify self-cherishing as this black rock around your heart, that's keeping you imprisoned. And your love is this white light that's behind, that's kind of being obscured, contained by this black rock. And the Kagyu doesn't really use the black rock. Kagyu tradition, they do Tonglen more with the nature of mind, and the spacious, limitless, boundless awareness, the empty awareness that is the nature of mind. So we're going to do a little bit of a combo because I like the way that feels. And in when I was talking to Geshe Shara, we were talking about creatively doing Tonglen, you know, because trying to get to the essence of how it's supposed to feel, which is freedom from self-cherishing and just abiding in spacious, loving well-being for all. So that is going to be the homework as well. And I think I wrote it out pretty much how we're going to do it now. So we're going to do the meditation because I won't have time. Okay, so just sitting up straight and a few deep breaths in and out. And remembering the presence of Chenrezig hovering above the crown of our head, and all of our teachers and guides, masters of these teachings in the space around us, above us. And again, bringing into the space the various characters in our lives, family members and friends, those who support us in all kinds of ways. Seeing a friend, an enemy, a stranger. Remembering how these boxes don't make any sense. Relationships are changing all the time. And there's no point in holding some close and others at a distance. No point in ignorant disregard just because we haven't seen a smile or a scowl. And recognizing that all of us, we're all the same. We're all equal. We just want happiness. We don't want to suffer. Although wishing to be free of misery, we run towards misery itself. Although wishing to have happiness, like an enemy, we ignorantly destroy it. And then seeing how the iron net of self-grasping, the self-centered, self-cherishing mind is the cause of all of our own personal problems, all the suffering in the world. Comes from this exaggerated, ignorant sense of self, permanent, separate. And wanting to break free.
and recognizing how wonderful it is to care about others, to cherish others. How even in that moment, there's happiness when we care about others. How every good thing in our lives, every good thing in the world comes from the good heart. Wanting to take care of others. And so making the determination to exchange our alliance with self-grasping and self-cherishing with an alliance of love for all. And then visualizing our great love as a white light at the heart. But surrounding it is a black mountain of rock, black obsidian, sharp, shiny, dense. That is our self-grasping, our self-cherishing, and that of the whole world. It's so contracted. And wishing to destroy it. Generate the wish to destroy all suffering, to take on all suffering, starting with ourselves in the future. Our suffering of tomorrow. Imagine that like a vacuum cleaner through time. We can suck up all the suffering that we are destined to experience of aging, sickness, of death, of future lives, emotional tumult, physical distress. And like glass slivers, they hit the black rock at the heart and they start to create cracks. And imagine that we take on all of our future suffering, of all our future lives. Take it upon us, finish it right now, here. And more black glass slivers hit the mountain of self-grasping at the heart, start to crack it even further. And then taking on suffering of those that we know. Economic pain, relationship pain, sickness, emotions, afflictions, and their causes. Imagine that we can suck them all up, take the right on to the black obsidian rock mountain at the heart. And all of these black glass slivers, they're starting to create more and more fissures, more and more cracks. And make a wish to end all suffering, all causes of suffering, all manifestation of pain and imbalance in this world. Take right onto self-grasping. Let self-grasping have it all. From this world, from all beings. Imagine as it comes, billions and billions of black glass slivers, all coming, hitting the black obsidian mountain of self-grasping at the heart. And it shatters. Melts away, falls apart. And the white light of love, spacious mind, unbounded, is there, brilliantly shining. Abundance. May I be well, happy, and peaceful. And the white light at the heart expands, filling our own body, pervading our entire mind. Granting us with every happiness, every cause of happiness, well-being, joy, an abundance of everything to give to everyone. May all beings in this area be well, happy, and peaceful. And the light expands, filling our dwelling, filling the area, the land around us, blessing all beings, human and non-human, bringing them happiness, peace, health, prosperity, everything they need. May all beings in this town be well, happy, and peaceful. And the light expands. Everything needed is easily obtained. Everyone is well in mind, well in body. And the environment is supported and cleansed, vibrant. May all beings in this state be well, happy, and peaceful. And the light expands. white light pervading all minds, putting everyone at peace, bringing everyone happiness, well-being, health, healing the land, healing the air, healing the water, all animals, everybody. May they be well, happy, and peaceful. May all beings in this country be well, happy, and peaceful, and the light expands. May all beings on this planet be well, happy, and peaceful, and the light expands, completely pervading every atom of this world, of this earth, healing the land, cleansing the air, purifying the waters, touching all beings and all lives, purifying all affliction, bringing recognition, affection, connection, love. May all beings in this universe be well, happy, and peaceful, and the light expands. May all beings everywhere, in all time, in all space, be well, happy, and peaceful, and the light expands. All there is white light in the vibration of love and well-being, connection. And again, light rays issue forth from our heart. They touch all beings and all environments. Everyone and everything melts into white light and absorbs into our own heart. We ourselves melt into light and dissolve from above and below into the ball of white light at our heart. This becomes smaller and smaller and smaller until it completely disappears. into clear light. No I to be found anywhere. A wish to benefit others. Our mind takes the form of a shaft of white light, which takes on the silhouette of our body. We are clarified as a pure light being, abiding in the world solely for the purpose of benefiting all. This is me. Om Mani Padme Hum. 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 I bow down to the body of him in whom the sacred precious mind is born. I take refuge in that source of joy who brings to happiness even those who harm them. And then if we could do the dedication prayers. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. For His Holiness, we can do this. May all teachers teaching true paths to enlightenment in any time, in any place, have long and stable lives, especially His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and all our other teachers. May all their holy wishes be fulfilled. Then we'll do Shantideva verses. There we go. May all beings everywhere plagued by sufferings of body and mind obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. Living creatures suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then, may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. And then sealing the dedication with the mind understanding emptiness, that nothing exists in and of itself, but everything arises in dependence. And because of this, through the power of our intention and the power of prayer, may all of our wishes be fulfilled. So one last thing, so the homework meditation in it, and you know, eventually when we become familiar with this meditation, it said eventually you do the meditation with the breath. You know, you actually start to, when you breathe in the suffering of all, the suffering of others, and when you breathe out, you send out happiness to others. I find that a little bit difficult because I can't do it that fast. But the more familiar we become with this idea of taking and giving and taking and giving, then the idea is slowly to conjoin it with the breath. And it's said that if you do that practice as you go to sleep while you're breathing, or if you do that practice at the death time with your breath, that it's said to be one of the most powerful transferences of consciousness, and one of the most powerful ways to make your sleep also virtuous. So, you know, as you become familiar with this idea of taking and giving, you can experiment with it with the breath. And the other thing is that, you know, as we're doing this practice, once that black obsidian rock has been shattered and the white love light of our mind has been freed, you can still do taking and giving. And this is where the Kagyu technique comes in. You can take suffering into the open, free, loving nature of mind. And it just dissolves because love is so great and the mind is so spacious, and it doesn't exist as something concrete, that there's plenty of room. It can just absorb the suffering, and it just dissolves into the spacious mind of light and love that's at the heart. So you can still do taking and giving with that visualization and that experience where the love just keeps expanding, and there's plenty of room to just absorb and dissolve suffering, and you can do away with the black rock. It's helpful at the beginning to kind of appreciate how that feels to be imprisoned by that mind, and to allow it to be completely destroyed, and then to do your taking and giving, you know, from that place of love and spacious, empty awareness. So that's the homework for this week. We have a big week here in the United States. Breathe, everybody. A lot, deeply. And yeah, we don't know what the state of the world will be when we meet next Thursday, but we'll definitely be doing a little extra practice, a little less talking from my side. Yeah.